giving 10 benefits, from this subject area. So I'll quickly go through them, inshallah ta'ala. The first one, first of all, is that the servant, by way of these names and attributes, he acquires the happiness of this life and the hereafter. And rather, we see that happiness in this life and the next is itself directly dependent upon, is directly tied to this faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this knowledge of Allah and His names and attributes. If you remember, in the previous lesson we mentioned how that the hearts and the ibadah, the worship of the heart itself, is dependent upon the knowledge that it is filled with. And so the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes really is like the life to the heart, because this knowledge is what then creates the emotions in the heart. The emotions in the heart, like love, fear, hope, reliance. These are things which the heart has emotions. But to drive those emotions, there must be the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes. So we see really that Allah's names and attributes really are the foundation of a person's worship of Allah and his outward ibadah. And that's why, for this reason, these people who deviate in Allah's names and attributes, they are doing a great deal of damage and harm to the people's iman, because they are eroding away the basis of people's iman. So that's the first benefit, that the happiness of a servant in this life and the next, it is tied to and dependent upon acquiring this particular knowledge. And rather, we see that the extent that really that the extent of the iman, the amount of iman of a person, is directly tied to his knowledge of Allah's names and His attributes. Right? So the greater his knowledge, the greater his iman, and the greater his happiness in this life and the next. Second benefit is that a believer having faith in Allah's names and His attributes, it is the greatest means and the greatest way by which he fears his Lord, by which he has khawf of his Lord, by which he has khashya of his Lord, of awe of his Lord, and by which he is propelled to obedience to Allah, to his Lord. Okay? And so the more a servant knows his Lord, then the more he will be closer to his Lord. The more he will be firm upon his worship, and the more he will keep away from disobedience. Right? So this knowledge makes him fearful of Allah, and makes him, have awe of Allah, and makes him firm upon obedience. The third benefit is that a believer with this knowledge in his heart, he acquires tranquility. He acquires tranquility. His heart is at ease, and he feels secure in this life and the next. Why? Because it is by Allah's remembrance that the hearts find tranquility. See how Allah says in the Quran, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَتَطْمَئِنُّ قُلُوبُهُمْ بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. Allah says, indeed, those who believe and whose hearts find tranquility in the remembrance of Allah. Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find tranquility. And obviously when we remember Allah, how are we remembering Allah? We only remember Him on account of what He's told us of His names and attributes. So this shows that a servant who knows Allah and His names and His attributes and is rooted in this knowledge, that he will be a person who is the most tranquil and at ease and at peace and feel safe and secure no matter what happens around him. Right? Because this knowledge is something that brings the safety and serenity and calmness and ease in the heart, as opposed to anxiety and stress and fear and this and so on and so forth, whatever. This knowledge really is it's the foundation of that safety and serenity. Fourth benefit is that the reward in the hereafter, all of it is tied to this iman. A person being rewarded is tied to this very faith. This faith, and having this faith and having this knowledge of Allah's names and attributes, and then acting upon what this knowledge requires. So if a person acts upon this, then he will have in the hereafter what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard of, and what has never been imagined in the heart and mind of a person. And likewise, he will be saved from the hellfire. And so all of this is, we see that this is the benefit of this knowledge. These are the effects and the fruits of this knowledge. And this is something that he will, that he will have. And obviously from that is that he will have the great pleasure of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter, looking at Allah's face. And this obviously is on top of the reward of being entered into paradise and saved from the hellfire. That's fourth benefit. Fifth benefit is that it is this faith, again, this iman in Allah in general, Allah's rububiyyah, uluhiyyah and asma wa sifat, that all of this faith is something that validates a person's actions. It makes your actions acceptable to Allah. It makes them correct and sound. Because remember, actions which are acceptable to Allah must have conditions. And those conditions are that they must be sincerely for His sake, upon tawheed, upon monotheism, seeking only Allah's face, and they must be correct. So this iman that we are speaking of, iman in Allah, His names and His attributes, and worshipping Him alone, and His rububiyyah, that this, when that is present, it validates the actions, meaning it makes them acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. That whoever rejects faith, rejects iman, and iman in Allah is iman in His names and attributes, iman in His uluhiyyah, and iman in His rububiyyah. So this faith is required for a person's actions to be acceptable. Likewise, Allah says, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. That whoever wishes for the hereafter and who strives for it as it should be striven for, whilst he is a believer, whilst he has iman. So he mentioned iman and he mentioned striving. So that iman in Allah, His names, His attributes, His uluhiyyah, His rububiyyah, is something upon which actions depend for their acceptance. So this is the fifth benefit, that iman is something that corrects and makes a person's actions acceptable. And it has to be the correct iman upon what we've obviously been discussing in these series of lessons. Sixth benefit is that correct iman which is sound and iman which is correct is something that keeps a servant adhering to the truth. It allows him to adhere to the truth and to continue to benefit from admonitions and from lessons. And it's something that maintains his fitrah to be sound, to keep his fitrah from being corrupt, and it makes him maintain a pure good intention and to be always desirous of good deeds and to keep away from evil things. Meaning that this cultivation, this nurturing of a person upon Allah's names and attributes, it's something that keeps him healthy and robust in these different ways. Meaning that he will always keep benefiting from admonitions, his heart will remain clean and sound, his fitrah will remain protected, he will always have a good intention, a good qasd, good niyyah, and he will always be led to good deeds. So this is the effect of the cultivation of this sound iman. It keeps him in check and keeps him in this manner. The seventh benefit that we have here is that having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this iman in Allah is something that a believer can recourse to. He can seek refuge in. He can from all of the evils that take place, from all of the harms, the fear, the disobedience that he falls to. We see that every person, every believer, he falls into these things. He has stresses, anxieties, evils befall him, becomes sad, he starts grieving about things, he fears about things, sometimes he obeys, sometimes he disobeys, sometimes he sins, sometimes he's pious. This happens to every single person. So in all of these things that take place, he always has something to fall back upon and refer back to, which is his iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, when nice things happen to him, when likable things happen to him, when pleasurable things happen to him, then in this situation, his iman, which he is acting upon, forces him to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forces him to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And This is one scenario. Another scenario is that maybe harmful things happen to him, dislikable things happen to him. He is sad, So here again he goes back and he recourses back to his iman again in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it leads him to have patience and to accept, to anticipate reward. And so likewise we can apply to all of the situations. Maybe sometimes he is obedient to Allah, so therefore he is grateful to Allah for keeping upon istiqamah. Maybe other times he is disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then his iman forces him to make tawbah to Allah. And so we see that in every situation that we have, a believer, whether it is in his religious affairs or whether it is in his worldly affairs, he always recourses back to his iman in everything. And this iman is something that really is the foundation for his life and his hereafter. So it keeps him in check again. Benefit number 8 is that this knowledge of Allah, this acquaintance of Allah, is something that brings about love, mahabba of Allah in the heart. It makes a servant inherit love of Allah, and it develops that love of Allah in the hearts, because the names of Allah are such that they naturally produce love in the heart. This is because mankind, the way Allah has created mankind, and the way Allah has created the hearts, and the way Allah has created the souls, is that Allah has made them inclined to love things which have beauty and perfection. Okay? Every you find yourself loving something in which there is perfection and beauty and so on and so forth. This is just how Allah has created mankind. So likewise, when they learn of Allah's names and His attributes and the perfection and the beauty in meaning behind Allah's names and attributes, then without doubt, this naturally causes a heart to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when a heart loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it in turn leads the limbs, because the limbs are the soldiers and the heart is the king. And so where the king goes, the soldiers always follow. So when the heart loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the limbs will follow in obedience. So this is why Allah's names and His attributes are the foundation of worship, and why this is an area that we must give the great importance to. Number 9, likewise, knowledge of Allah's names and attributes, it causes a person to inherit yaqeen, certainty, to have yaqeen, certainty in the fact that Allah is alone and singled out in controlling all of the affairs of the creation, and that there is no partner to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in anything. And so therefore the servant will not be successful except by reliance and making tawakkul upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, it makes him to have tawakkul upon Allah. He will have yaqeen first and foremost. So Allah's names and attributes cause him to have yaqeen, certainty in everything. And that certainty itself is something that brings about trust and reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, number 10 is that the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes is the foundation of every single knowledge in the creation. Every type of knowledge in the creation, every type of worldly knowledge, every type of knowledge, in fact, all of it emanates and arises from the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes. This is because everything in terms of knowledge is either what we call al-khalq or al-amr. Everything which can be known is either it is from the creation or it is from Allah's command. It is something Allah has created or it is something Allah has commanded. These are two things. Al-khalq wal-amr. Allah's creation or Allah's command. And so in other words, the Sharia is from Allah's command. This is what we mean, Allah's command. Whatever Allah commands is His Sharia, His commands and His prohibitions. So therefore, this is the knowledge of the Sharia. And Allah's creation is the knowledge of everything in the dunya. Everything in the creation, all the different types of sciences and knowledge and whatever else, all of that. So because Allah's names and attributes are tied to His creation and His command. Right? So Allah creates and Allah commands. Allah creates, Allah commands. Then Allah's names and attributes are tied to these two things. So for example, from Allah's names you see that Allah is Al-Khaliq, the creator, Al-Razzaq, the provider, Al-Muhyi, the one who gives life, Al-Mumit, the one who takes life. All of these are names which are tied to Allah's, the creation. And likewise, we see some of them are tied to Allah is Al-Hakim, Allah is wise, Allah is, Allah does whatever He wills, and there are many other descriptions and attributes and names which are tied to His Sharia. The fact that Allah commands that which is beneficial for the servants, that Allah wishes mercy upon His servants, all so on and so forth. Then we see that some of His names are tied to the Sharia. So we see from this that every single type of knowledge, all of it, whether it's worldly knowledge or Sharia knowledge, all of it comes back down to and arises from and has its basis in the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes. Right? So this is why that the one who has the most knowledge of Allah's names and attributes is the one who is the most knowledgeable of the creation and of Allah's Sharia. Right? So understand that. So this is why the point that we're getting here is that we shouldn't be deceived by thinking that just because the non-Muslims or just because they have all the sciences and knowledge and this about the universe and this knowledge and that knowledge, whatever, that as if they are the most knowledgeable of the creation. No, because that knowledge of the creation is more. It's not true and real knowledge from the right perspective of the creation. It's really a type of misguided type of knowledge. Even though it's knowledge, it's out of its place. It's from the wrong perspective. So despite having that knowledge, they are still blind and still ignorant. Right? So this is why that the ones who are truly knowledgeable of the creation, of al-khalq and al-amr, of the sharia, are the ones who are the most knowledgeable of Allah's names and His attributes. And no doubt that is the prophets and messengers, and then the scholars after them. And so this is the 10th benefit, that if you want to truly have knowledge of the creation and the command, meaning the dunya, the creation and the sharia, then you must be someone who understands and has knowledge of Allah's names and His attributes, because through that you then see everything taking place around you through Allah's names and attributes, because Allah's attributes are reflected in everything that takes place around us. And so with this is the 10th benefit. So with this we conclude today's